Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing River Valley Glassworks from All Play. River Valley Glassworks is a 1 to 5 player game of collecting sets of glass, trying to organize them on your player board until eventually one player has 17 pieces, which will trigger the endgame, and you'll see how everyone did in the game. I understand that's not a full rules teach, we'll get into more of it shortly. But before we do, two very important disclaimers. First of all, this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. And in fact, over on the crowdfunding campaign, there's going to be a whole deluxe Founders Edition, a bunch of versions of the game. You can check which one is right for you, or if the game is right for you at all. And then secondly, and very important disclaimer, this is not a sponsored review, but it is worth noting that Board Game Co. is doing a sponsored gameplay, or has done a sponsored gameplay around the game, and in case that muddies the water a bit too much for you, I completely understand that. Please take all opinions with a grain of salt. Understand that there is sponsored gameplay that has been done in association with this review. I usually try not to do sponsored and unsponsored content at the same time. In this case, All Play asked for a review, which I happily said yes to because I wanted to cover the game, and then later asked for a gameplay, so we did both. But again, just very clear, if that makes this video not for you, totally get that. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into the video. So, River Valley Glassworks is a game of collecting glass. On your turn, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to reset your personal glass, gathering more glass from the lake until you have glass in your bag, where you have a maximum of 5. So it's basically a refill turn, but you won't be starting with that because you start with glass in your bag. Your most common turns in this game is going to be taking a piece of glass and then putting it on the matching symbol. So this glass goes on this symbol, and then once you do that, taking glass from either before or after that particular piece. In this case, I'll take from these pieces over here, I'll gather this tile over here, I'll slide it down, and then I'll refill 2 pieces in the bag, 2 because that's how many pieces are showing over here. So I'll go ahead and gather 2 pieces and put them on that tile. There we go. Meanwhile, these pieces have to go onto my player board, where I'm going to put them in either order of my choosing because I'm not yet locked in, and I'll put them over there. We'll have the next player go, they'll go ahead and place this one, we'll have them place and be slightly efficient. Let's place this one over here, and they'll take these 2, they'll put them down over here, and then again, this will slide down over here like so, pushing this around there. There is one more action you can take, but we'll show you that soon. Again, we'll have 2 more pieces of glass over there, and then right now it's back to my turn. I think I'm going to go ahead and place this down over here and try to gather these 3 pieces of glass. Again, matching the type, gathering these 3, putting this down over here. I'm only just moving these 3 over here, which means we're constantly putting out 2 new pieces, but that eventually is going to have to shift. And we'll gather these pieces over here, and then we have to put this one over here. We have to put this one over here, and this one can go over here. Meaning basically, whenever you add a new color to your board, you put it in the new spot. If you add multiple new colors at once, you choose the order of those new colors. But if it's a color that already exists on your board, it has to go on your board in that column. Because in this game, you want both rows and columns. Because at the end of the game, you're going to score points for your longest rows, all of your longest rows. Basically, you're going to see any row that's uninterrupted. So for example, this over here is a 4-point row. If we get more colors, which we would in the game, you'll have more points, up to 22 points for a row. The tricky part is as you add more things to the game over here, let's gather a few pieces of glass in the bag, so I can show you this over here. Let's say we had something similar to this over here. In this situation, we would score a 7-point row, but the next row is only a 2-point row because we're missing that orange piece. You have to be mindful that you only score for as far as a row goes from left to right. That's going to be how you score points, so you're trying to get as many rows as possible, because if you can get 3 rows, well, that's 66 points. 3 full rows would be amazing. Also, good luck doing that. That's going to be very hard. But additionally, you're going to score points for your 2 highest columns with a big asterisk. Your 2 highest columns means, for example, if we go ahead and we put this over here and this over here, that is an 8-point column. Over here, that's going to be 8 points for that column. But if we add more, let's say we get a bunch of these over here, and let's say we gather 1 more yellow from the bag. If we put this yellow over here, that's a 15-point column. Meaning, even though it's only 3 compared to that 8, this is 15 points because the further out you go, generally the harder it is to get those high columns. So if you can get a high column further out, it's going to be worth more points, as much as 35 points if you have all 5 pieces. Well, technically there's more than 5, but if you have 5 pieces of a color in one row over here, you'll get a chunk of points. So you want to try to do that. The tricky part is you always score for your leftmost column from the 2 highest. Meaning right now, our 2 highest are a 4 and a 3, so we score 15 plus 8 for a total of 23 points, plus the 11 over here, plus the 2 over here, that's going to be our total score. But if we had a single white piece right now added to the board over here, let's grab a white piece. If we had a single white piece over here, well, suddenly we no longer score for this 3-point column, 3-piece column. Instead, we'll score for this 3-point column, costing us 12 points. In this case, taking an extra white would cost us 12 points, not gain us 12 points. you're trying to be mindful of that as you gather gems from the river. Now there is a rarity as well. There's a little rarity indicator. You can see yellows, purples, and whites are going to be more common. Yellows and oranges are going to be least common, and there's a little chart showing you what's more or less common in the game. There's also black pieces for a 5-player game only, and you're trying to fill out your board until you eventually have 17 pieces, which you can track over here. Again, prototype, these are going to be changing, but you have over here up to 17 pieces, which will trigger endgame, at which point players will get one return, and you'll go ahead and see who scores the most points by filling out their grid from both rows and columns. The last things to cover is when you take a refill turn, you're going to gather 4 gems from the 5 in the river. So let's say I go ahead and take these over here. If you ever have overflow in your bag, meaning you could take a refill turn when you have 2 or 3 gems, but you have to take 4, which means if you take a refill turn when you have 3 gems in your bag, 2 are going to go to the overflow area, which will cost you -3 points per gem. The other ways to get overflow is you only actually have room for 7 gems on your board, and there are 8 different gems, or 9 in a 5-player game, which means you could have overflow from just having too many gems from the variety of gems you take, or from having too many by overflowing. If I do 2 purple right now, if I took this spot, that means I get 2 purples and 1 would go to the overflow, and all those overflow gems from any of those 3 ways will cost you 3 points apiece. That's the game. That's really everything. You're going to gather gems from the river. Oh, no, one more thing, almost everything. The last thing you can do on your turn is you can go ahead and give in 2 gems of the same shape, these 2 triangles, for example, and you can use those to go anywhere on the board, which can be very helpful when you don't otherwise have a good piece to go on a spot. So 2 of the same type will let you go ahead and place gems out, and look at that, I'm getting a chunk of extra points from that one. Oh my gosh, over here, I'm not scoring well for columns, but I got 16 plus 11 over here, so we got a nice 2 rows over there, plus these 2 columns coming in at 4 and 10 respectively. It's a decent score, but I've done better. That is how you play River Valley Glassworks, which brings us into the ease of play, the review starting with ease of play, which is the game's incredibly easy to play. And if you don't believe me, you can go ahead and check it out on Board Game Arena, where it's currently available to see if it's a game for you. But the rules are fairly straightforward. It's basically just collecting glass with a very simple collection system, got beautiful table presence, and again, this is a prototype that isn't even the founder's version. If you get that, there'll be even more to going on as far as just the general. It's going to be like all glass pieces, double layered boards, all these fun little extras. But in general, it's a game about gathering sets of glass, putting into your player board, and seeing how you can efficiently gather the right sets of glass more so than more sets of glass. The right stuff is more important than just more stuff in this game. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the game is incredibly simple. It has a very straightforward scoring mechanism. It plays incredibly quickly with a great production and is very easy to teach and works well at multiple player counts, which is a bunch of things, but that's basically what the package of this game is. This is not an incredibly intricate game. For better or for worse, it's a very simple, straightforward game. It's got a system that ultimately comes down to trying to gather sets of gems, trying to be mindful of, hey, I want little pieces of glass, I'm going to put them into my little board over here, score as efficiently as possible, but being mindful that more is not always better, getting the right stuff. Again, sometimes more can cost you. You can gather gems in this game that will actually cost you points. And so the whole charm of the game comes from the fact that you can play a game in like 10-15 minutes. You can knock it out. That's in person, by the way. On BGA, you can knock out a game in like 12 minutes, if that much, less than 5-7 minutes. If you're playing a 2-player game on BGA, you can knock that thing out in 7 minutes or less. But if you're playing a game even in person, even at a 4-person game in person, you're talking about a 20-minute experience. It's very fast-moving, very easy to teach, very easy to play, very satisfying to try to just do one more game. This is an enjoyable, quick-playing game that's simple to teach, simple to play, easy to learn, plays in a quick time frame, works well at different player counts. Again, the 2-player game is going to be a different feel than a 4 or 5-player game. 4 or 5-player game, it's more about what you do for yourself. A 2-player game can be just as much about the denial of taking gems away from others or forcing gems onto as many spots as possible. You see someone eyeing a spot on the board that has 3 gems you want, the best thing you can possibly do is dump a few gems in there that you know are not good for their score, and suddenly you've muddied the waters. So a 2-player game is going to have a very much, anything one player does hurts the other, so you can be very mindful in that experience, but at 3, 4, and 5 is going to be a different but equally satisfying experience. As far as things I don't like in the game, first of all, a few small nitpicks here. The biggest thing is going to be, at the end of the day, this is a very simple, straightforward game with not a lot happening in the game, which, for better or for worse, means it's very good at what it's doing, but also it means that the depth of it just isn't there. Like, I don't know if they have plans for modules or expansions. I hope they do, frankly, because I've been having fun with this game, but my biggest question mark is, Is this a game that's fun for 5, for 10, for 15 plays, or is it a game that I'm still pulling out 3 years from now? I just don't know, because it's very much a one-trick pony. It's a very well done one-trick pony, but it is a one-trick pony. As far as other nitpicks, I'll say small things. First of all, restocking from the river feels like a move in the game that's just completely uninteresting. You can do it before you have 1 gem left, but it's rarely worth doing so, because the desire for a specific piece is rarely worth that 3-point penalty in the game, which means usually you're waiting until you have 1 or no pieces left on your board, at which point you're restocking 4 out of the 5 from the river, which means you're basically just leaving 1 piece behind. I think the whole restocking from the river mechanism, it almost feels like there's extra layered rules in there that it just make it less satisfying. I think it'd be more interesting to, for instance, to restock from the river and you never take overflow. You restock up to 5. It's already penalizing you because you're getting less efficiency from your actions, but I've never seen someone restock and take a penalty to do so. Maybe it's worth it, but in my games I just haven't seen that. The 3 points is just a big ding that it takes away any edge there. I think it'd be more an interesting layered decision to just take fewer pieces and depriving some degree of efficiency, but without the 3-point penalty. And the fact that you take 4 to 5, again, just take all 5, or I don't know, it feels a little off in terms of that mechanism, but again, I am being a little nitpicky in terms of what it's actually doing. Past that, I'll say the final plays of the game, the final draws, can be very luck-driven, meaning throughout the course of the game, you have a lot of room and opportunity to respond to what the game is doing. But I've seen a few games end with, oh, great, you just drew 2 of the gems you've been waiting on the whole game, and I haven't seen them. I've seen games end with that, where a player manages to get the points they need, the gems they need, just through the final luck of the draw, and it's less satisfying when it happens at the very end of the game. The good news is the game is very short, so it's limiting as far as how annoying that is. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, the pieces being too similar in look and feel. This is one of those tricky parts where if you look at these pieces over here, trying to tell apart some of these pieces at a glance, it's very hard to do so at a glance, which means it slows down a bit. And the upside of that is, I think part of the reason for that is this way when you're drawing from the bag, it is hard to feel your way to a certain piece past these little guys. These are very easy to feel for. Everything else, unless you're trying to feel them, it's very quick to draw them from the bag. But there is that potential aspect. You might find players who are upset that you can feel your way through the bag, or the pieces are too similar, which are kind of 2 sides of the same complaint, but still a reasonable complaint if it bothers you. Hasn't been an issue for me. I'll say that if you don't like the potential for hate drafting, especially in a 2-player game, it's present in this game, and it definitely has that. Yes, this is nice and kind, and honestly, if you want to play it the nice and kind way, play it at 4 or 5 players. At 3 players, there's going to be a little bit of hate drafting, and at 2 players, it's all hate drafting as you go through it. And then lastly, the game ends very quickly. It's a short game. If you're looking for a game where you can do a ton of it, this is not giving you that experience. This is about that fast-paced 10 to 15 to 20-minute game in which you go ahead and gather a bunch of gems, score up, and then if you're not happy with how you did, you can go ahead and dive back in. As far as final thoughts on River Valley Glassworks, I like this game a decent amount. And it's one of those weird things because I've played this by now at least 10 times, which for a prototype is very strange for me. I played it when I first played at PAX Unplugged, I dove into it then, I brought home the prototype, I dove into a bunch more when it's on Board Game Arena, I proceeded to play it, but you can see a film gameplay on the channel as well. I have played this game a bunch and I've had fun doing so. I'm excited to just dive back in. It's a fast, easy to play game. It's very accessible. But also that accessibility comes at the cost of depth. For me right now, this is a 3.5 out of 5. I am curious to see how it holds up. I both know that I've played it a lot and enjoyed it much more than I typically do with the prototype, and I also know that because it's very much a one-trick pony, I'm very intrigued to see what the crowdfunding campaign delivers. Is it going to be just about the Founders Edition, which I do want. I do want to try it and see it and get the most premium feel from it, but I do hope they layer in a bit more as far as expansions or modules or something else that gives it a bit more teeth. As it stands, it's a great game to recommend. It's a good gateway game. It's easy to pull out and play when you want, when you want something that's going to be quick and appeal to a variety of player counts. But because it very much is that one-trick pony, I just wonder how long it stays its welcome in my collection. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, a classic that's going to be compared to is Azul. This game very much has that same just general appeal as far as trying to gather things and figure out how they're going to score for you. And then secondly, I'll say that if you're looking for a game that does a very similar thing as far as how the scoring works, but in a very different system, highly recommend checking out Sub-Astral from Renegade Games. It's more of a card game. It's a card-driven game. Very similar scoring system, but slightly different puzzle. If you like one, I think you'll like elements of both of those games. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.